Hello, job seekers. Melanie here with CGL Recruiting. And today we're going to be answering the question, how much time does HR spend looking at my resume? And I know this is a question that you hear all these different types of articles, and we did a survey and a study and whatever. So this is definitely something we wanted to include on the survey that we did to HR professionals. Now, remember, when we did this survey, we made sure we controlled that URL really, really strongly. So we only heard from HR people. So what I'm going to share with you today is their responses on actually how long they spend looking at your resume. And we are going to look at this data from a couple of different angles because I thought it was really interesting when we looked at it. And I think if you're an HR person watching this, you are going to find this very interesting as well, because when I broke this up by years of experience and by HR roles or function, you're going to be, I think, a little surprised by what you see. So without further ado, let me go ahead and share it with you. Please remember, subscribe if you haven't yet, so you'll see the results of all of our survey data, as well as all the other great information that we try to share day in and day out to help everybody with their job search. Okay, let's take a look at the beginning of the data. And here we go. Now, this is the overarching general question. And I'm going to pull me out for a second and show you so you can see this full screen, because I know it's a little small. And then I will come back and we'll talk more about it. So the question that we asked overall is, how much time do you spend looking at a resume? And we did give them tranches to try and classify their time, but we left it pretty open. So I can even, if we want to in a follow-up video, tell you who looked less than 30 seconds. But in general, looking at the total information, and we had, I think it was 114 or something people, HR professionals that replied. And I will say the majority of them were in the US, though not all of them. There were a large portion of them that did have a US and a global feel. And what we saw is in this less than 1 minute category, 22% of our respondents said they do spend less than 1 minute looking at your resume. But the majority went to that 1 to 5 minutes, which is this 45%. 45% of those responding said they take approximately 1 to 5 minutes to look at your resume. And then looking at the next, which is the 6 to 10 minutes, we had 24% spending 6 to 10 minutes looking at your resume. And then we had 8% spending 10 to 20 minutes, and 1% that actually spent more than 20 minutes on your resume. Now, I do want to look at this data. This is the total information. When we look at it from a US perspective, the numbers don't change that terribly much. What you see in the total is it's 22 for less than a minute and 45. But when we look at the US, it's 24 for the less than a minute and 44 for the total. So not a huge difference. But when we did pull out and look at, instead of US, but looked at international information, this is where we saw a big difference. Now, again, I want to remind you, US, the less than 1 minute was at 24%. International, less than 1 minute was only at 13%. The vast majority are over here in the international looking at that 1 to 5 minutes. So I thought that was very interesting when we did look at this, that there was such a difference within the US and the international groups as to how much time they spent looking at your resume. Now, I will tell you, there's a lot of questions on the surveys that have been done, or not the surveys, I should say, the studies that have been done where people hand HR people resumes and say, okay, tell me how long it takes you to look at this. Some people feel like those are accurate. Some people feel like they're not accurate because you're putting people under the pressure. And so what I was a little surprised so many came up with less than a minute is because we didn't tell them you have this amount of time to look at it. We just asked in general, how long do you spend looking at a resume? Now, looking at that same data, I want to show you the next piece, which is we split this up in different ways, which I think also tells you a lot about who you're sending your resume in and how long they're going to look and do. So let's take a look at that now. So when we looked at breaking this out by experience and looked at individuals with 0 to 10 years of HR experience. So these are people that are maybe in their first role of HR or just at the beginning part of their career. And we see that less than 1 minute time was at 38%. 38% were less than a minute, and then 34% were at that 1 to 5 minutes. And then the rest, 14% at 6 to 10, and 14% 10 to 20. Now look what happens as I go up in years of experience. So remember, 38% for 0 to 10. When I go to 10 to 20 years experience, do you see what just happened to our graph? Now the less than 1 minute is at 21%. It took a significant jump down, with much, much more of them going into this 43%, which is this 1 to 5 minutes that they spend on your resume. And then the 6 to 10 was 29%, and the 10 to 20 is at 7%. Well, now let's look at this again and say, let's go even further than 10 to 20 years, and let's look at those with 20 years experience. And look what just happened again. And again, this time we're looking at less than 1 minute. For those with over 20 years experience, we're looking at 15%, with the majority of the people that responded, HR, that had over 20 years experience, were in that 1 to 5 minute range. Now, I thought that was incredibly interesting when we looked at it. And I think that, let me even show it to you in a different format so you can kind of see what happens with the more years of experience that HR has. Let me share this with you. So looking at it from a different standpoint, a bar chart, and I know this is a little bit small, bear with me and I'll help walk you through it. The ones that are red are those people that have 0 to 10 years experience. And the ones that are orange are those with 10 to 20. And the ones in yellow are those with over 20 years experience. So what we're seeing when we look at this overall is it is these people that are in this 0 to 10 years experience that are spending the least amount of time on the resumes. If you look, this is 38% are spending less than 1 minute, right? Let me see if I can show this with the mouse. 38% are spending less than 1 minute. 34% are spending only 1 to 5 minutes. So when you add those together, that is 72% of that population are spending less than 5 minutes. But this is the number that concerns me the most. The 1 to 5 minutes, I think that, when you start getting up into that 5 minute range, even better, that 6 to 10, that is a reasonable amount of time to be spending when you're doing those type of more initial reviews. Now, I know we do have this one outlier in the 20-year experience area that did over 20 minutes. My guess is that this person is a CHRO and looking at very senior level resumes and really trying to dig into the accomplishments and probably does not look at as many. But this, to me, is a little bit concerning that maybe this 0 to 10 years and those HR people that are coming right out of college or school or into their first HR job, I would think that they don't know the jobs as well as the HR people that have 10, 20 years experience. And they should be spending more time matching a job description to a resume. So here's what I think, though, is they're not looking beyond the keywords. And that's how they're moving so fast. And that's why they're doing it in less than a minute. Now, when you also consider, you probably have more people that are in that HR admin and that HR coordinator and that entry-level sourcer and recruiter roles who are in that 0 to 10 years experience. After you get your 10 years, you're generally moving up into more senior roles. So we did look at the data not only by years of experience, but we did look at it also by HR functions. And let me share that information with you as well, because again, very interesting. So how much time do you spend looking at a resume? This chart represents everybody that was an HR professional that was that qualified themselves in a specialty area. So this is not a generalist or a business partner. This is an HR person that's in inclusion and diversity or compensation or benefits, some kind of learning and development, some type of training specialty. That's what these individuals, and you'll see the less than 1 minute is about 15%, with the vast majority of them at 57% being at this 1 to 5 minute range. Now let's look and see what happens when we look at the next, which is those individuals in a generalist or an HR business partner type of role. And when we talk about the generalist and the HR business partner, what we're talking about is a generalist does everything. So they can be an HR person for a smaller company that is forced by size to do all kinds of HR, or they might be a generalist in a larger company that does more of all of the different facets of HR. And the HR business partners are those ones that are more aligned with the businesses. Like you may have an HR business partner aligned with a manufacturing manager and helps provide all that kind of HR business partner work in that manufacturing facility. So these people are generally have to be that generalist, and they do have some, of course, talent management, acquisition, and recruiting as part of their job, but it is not at all their full-time job. There's usually some type of other recruiting that also helps them or assists them, depending on the different company. Okay, let's go back and look bigger at this data. So when we looked at the generalist business partner, what we saw is this less than 1 minute dropped down to 12%. And just to remind you, when we looked at those in a specialty area, it was 15% for this first one and 57. And then when we went to the generalist, it went 12 and then 44. And what you saw is this area over here bump up, which is the 6 to 10 minutes, which this was interesting, but it gets even more interesting. Let me show you what happens when we went and looked at those that classified themselves as HR administration. So these are HR admin assistants, HR coordinators, people in that HR administration level, and look what happened to that less than 1 minute. It went to 50%. I was a little shocked when I saw this, I have to tell you the truth, that it went to that 50%. Again, the HR administration are individuals who maybe do not have the more broad, diverse functionality in HR, and they may not know the jobs and competencies as much as HR in the other functions and area. I was shocked that over 50% of the HR administration said that they spend less than 1 minute looking at your resume. So job seekers, this is all about knowing your audience. If you can know who you're getting your resume into, is it going to an HR leader? Is it going to administration partner? That's going to give you an idea of how long they're going to spend and what's important. And if you're an HR person looking at this as an HR person myself was a little bit concerning. And I wonder if we're not, as HR professional leadership people, doing the right training for our HR administration that less than a minute looking at a resume is not going to get you any more than a couple keyword matches in most cases. So definitely data to take a look at. But there's more because we did look at the other level, and I want to show that to you now. So this is HR administration. This is what recruiting and talent acquisition. These are individuals that identify themselves as specifically in recruiting or talent acquisition. And again, you do still see this number is way higher, less than 1 minute in that how much time they spend looking at a resume. 1 minute. And that all comes down to, you hear me talk a lot about gates, and that there are gates that when a recruiter or a talent acquisition person is looking at your resume, if they know the hiring manager wants you to have at least a master's degree, and it's a requirement for this scientific position that this person have a master's in polymer science, then they are going to do a quick look on your resume, right? They're going to look and say, has it, doesn't have it. And so that may be influencing this figure, I hope, but it's still concerning to me that it is a less than 1 minute look. Let's take a look, though, at the last one that we did look at, which is the HR leadership. And when we went to HR leadership, look what happened. The less than 1 minute went down all the way to 16%. 16%. The vast majority spent 1 to 5 minutes looking at a resume, 1 to 5 minutes. And this 16% is, I think, much more accurate to what this picture should look at. And again, just to show you HR leadership versus the recruiter, here is recruiting and talent acquisition with those numbers. 40% at the less than 1 minute, 27 at 1 to 5, 20 at 6 to 10, and 13 at 10 to 20, compared with leadership. Only 16 at that less than 1, 51 at the 1 to 5, 27, 6 to 10, 4% at the 10 to 20, and 2% at more than 20 minutes. So again, job seekers, know your audience. If you know who you're going to be sending your resume into in HR, if you've done some research and said, oh, it's a smaller company, they only have a this, they only have a that. This definitely seems to support the fact that if they are in an HR administration or recruiting, they are doing that much, much quicker look at your resumes. What I want to say to my HR community is, again, this data is concerning to me. And we utilize applicant tracking systems now. And those applicant tracking systems do those quick keyword matches. And they say, does the person have, more than 10 years experience in the oil field dealing with valves and actuators? And if the resumes come up against those already key terms and key parameters that we have put in the system, why on average would we be spending less than a minute looking at the resumes of those job seekers? I think we're missing the boat. All right, everybody, I hope this data was helpful. We have great other survey data coming out. If you have not subscribed yet, do it now, because we have so many videos popping out that are going to have all of those HR survey results. We have the job seeker survey results, and we have been gaming on trying to do as much research and get other tools and resources for all of you job seekers, so you have the best year ever and find that job that you truly want and love. As always, thanks for watching. If you feel like this data was helpful, please give us that thumbs up in the end, and I will see you next time.